Tune in to Heartland for the best in true country music. Relive vintage specials, one-of-a-kind concerts, and country music's earliest videos. Heartland is the heart of country. The only place where you can find country music, country stars, and country lifestyles 24/7. Heartland, the heart of country.
Now on channel 13.2.
Hi, I'm John Malos. Welcome to this live edition of Connect with Me on the showroom floor at Ventura TV on this Friday morning. Today we'll be talking about mental health, including schizophrenia. And yes, we'll be talking about Bruce Jenner as well. You're more than welcome to call in. We have an open line, 436-ME-TV, option 11. We're back here on the program on a Friday morning on Connect with Me on MeTV Fresno. Glad you're along. We do have an open line. We'll be taking phone calls throughout the day, and if you have any questions, do not be bashful. Be more than willing to call in if you are so willing. 436-MeTV, option 11. The special guest is in the house to answer any of your questions and all of your questions. By the way, every Monday through Friday, you can watch us on Comcast, channel 187 and 43.6. And 13.1, that's live, 10 o'clock to 11 on MeTV. And then later in the day, the replay shows up at 2 o'clock on your screen at 13.6, and then 8 o'clock at night on 4.6 Biz TV. And then there's the Twitter account to take into consideration at John Malos, MeTV. As mentioned, we're going to be talking about mental health here on the program today. And you might recall just earlier this year, we had a special guest here talking about all sorts of aspects of mental health. He is back again today. We're going to focus on many other aspects of it on this day as well, including schizophrenia. People who have it claim that they hear little voices inside their head, and they also say that those voices are telling them to commit these evil deeds or acts, like maybe to hurt others, including hurting themselves. You know, about 5 years ago, ABC News did a special report on schizophrenia. Dr. Timothy Johnson did the report. Here's a sampling of what you may have seen back in 2010.
They are present every waking minute. And worse, when night falls, they are everywhere.
Why don't you just read?
The voices, the internal demons that take shape and form as words of torment. Evil! Unbidden, these voices can be triggered by certain religious symbols of faith.
Run away!
Mingle in the lyrics of songs. Spew venom from computers, cell phones, and radio. And send negative commands through the television airwaves. All the voices are evil intonations urging destruction and harm. Ken Steele has heard those voices most of his life.
I was 14 years old, listening to the radio like a lot of kids, hiding it under my bed. The announcer came on, and he started talking directly to me. I mean, he was talking about me and to me.
Live in our studio now, a repeat guest, Peter Nazaretian, a family therapist and national board certified counselor. He is here to answer your questions. Hey, 436-MeTV, option 11. Don't be bashful, friends, if you have a problem or know of a friend who has a problem. Today we're talking about schizophrenia and many other types of mental illness. That's the focus today. We're back with our program here on Connect with Me in a moment.
A top secret location. It's the spies who love me, bringing together MeTV's top super spies to fight evil at a memorable moment's notice. They're daring.
That's right.
Brave.
Now what are we gonna do?
The best we can.
Suave.
Does that apply to me, Oscar?
Possibly.
And smart.
The old finger in the gun trick.
Maxwell Smart.
MeTV Fresno, channel 43.6 and Xfinity 187.
You can find movies on over-the-air channel 13.3. Movies. Our name says it all.
And we're back here on Connect with Me on a Friday morning. Call in, my friends. We're talking mental illness. Peter Nazaretian is back on our program. How are you, Peter? Good to see you.
I'm well, John. Nice to see you. Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. And May is what?
National Mental Health Awareness Month.
Yeah, and what does that mean? You want people to be aware that there are lots of people out there that have problems day in and day out, huh?
Absolutely.
Struggling.
And a lot of people, civilians, if you will, don't understand what that is. And so when people act depressed or offbeat in some way, they're not sure what that is. And oftentimes it's a mental illness. And if it's not understood, it can look a little bizarre sometimes.
Yeah. Talked about schizophrenia in the monologue. I remember that long series that Dr. Timothy Johnson did on ABC about 5 years ago. It was really very intriguing and very kind of depressing, actually. How many people have you found in your practice that actually have schizo?
Schizophrenia is not a type of presenting symptom that we see in private practice very often. It's more in the hospital. I was fortunate enough, this will sound weird, I was fortunate enough to be in a mental hospital for 13 years as a therapist. And I saw a lot of it in there, but because it's hard to function in society with it, this is the type of thing you're going to see more in a mental hospital than in private practice. People don't have garden variety schizophrenia, although I think it's important to note something. Schizophrenia, like anything else, is on a continuum. The clip we saw, demons and voices, and yes, there are some of that. But you can obviously have a mild version of it where it's a little bothersome, it gets in the way, but it isn't necessarily debilitating or horrifying.
Do people actually hear voices?
Yeah.
I mean, like an actual voice talking to them?
Yeah. Sometimes groups of voices, sometimes a crowd.
Like you're talking to me right now, I can hear you. Is it kind of like that?
Well, let me give you an example. I also teach at the University of Phoenix in the program and getting new therapists ready to come into the business. And one of the ways we try to describe what mental illness is like, what schizophrenia is like, is have them sit in a chair and have somebody sit on one side of them next to their head and somebody on the other side, and they whisper in their ear different things. And they're talking about driving, or they're talking about having a bath or whatever it might be, and they just keep whispering those things in the ear, and the person is trying to have a conversation while these people are whispering in the ear like that. If you can imagine what that must be like, that's what it is.
That's what schizo is, and medicine can take care of that?
Yeah. Not everybody hears the voices, not all the times is what we call command hallucinations, where you actually have to act out in some way. Sometimes it's just bothersome and you want it to stop, but it doesn't necessarily debilitate your ability to go through the world. It just gets overwhelming at a time, exhausting, as you imagine. At the other end of the spectrum, they can be religiously preoccupied and they can't function at all because they're convinced that voices are talking to them, telling them to do things. So it's a wide variety.
All right, talking with Peter Nazaretian, 436-ME-TV, option 11. Peter is obviously a family therapist, but also on the national board, a national board certified counselor. So you can call in at 436-ME-TV, option 11 if you have a question, maybe a relative, a friend, perhaps yourself you might have issues with mental illness one way or the other. There's so many different kinds. I don't know all of the mental illnesses up on the board, but I do want to put up a full screen of schizophrenia and describe exactly what it is. It's a long-term mental disorder, a type involving a breakdown in the relation between thought, emotion, and behavior, leading to faulty perception, inappropriate behavior. You can kind of read the rest for yourself up there. Is this kind of the basic description of schizo?
Yeah, although it's hard for people who don't have it to understand what that means. What is a breakdown between the relationship and thought and feeling and emotion? How do you describe that? And that's one of the reasons that makes it so elusive, John, is because it's hard to describe. It's hard to quantify.
We all have fantasies. Put that back up there just for a second. It said fantasies up there. We all have fantasies. Does that mean we have schizo? Or?
No. I mean, a fantasy is sometimes a good thing. With a schizophrenic, unfortunately, those fantasies seem like reality. so it's not quite as enjoyable. And since we don't exactly know how it works, it's like a breakdown. And let me see, if you imagine if you had a million little wires, and they're like on a car or something, or a computer, except you take the rubber off the wire here and there, and every so often one of those bare wires touches each other, and the signal goes in a different direction. Imagine your brain does that. You want to think this, but suddenly the signal goes in a different direction, and it goes various places. We don't know what that is. We don't know. You're talking to somebody, and they're over here or over there or over there. It's confusing. It's disconcerting, and that's for us trying to listen to them. What's it like to be that person? Everything is going sideways, and they're not sure what it is. What's real? What's not? Are you talking to me? Are other voices talking to me? Who is? And that's like that all day long.
How do you deal with a person who has schizo? In other words, I guess that's not the right question. How do you communicate with them as a therapist or as, say, a doctor? How would they communicate with these people?
Well, it depends on the degree. Like anything, it's on a continuum. If it's fairly minor, they just have a little bit, then chances are they can function pretty well. More severe, not so much. The easy answer is medication. If it's pervasive, if it's intrusive, then medication is necessary to quiet that down.
Yeah, and how many forms of medication are there? Just hundreds of different forms?
Well, I wouldn't say hundreds. There's quite a variety of them, and of course they're being developed all the time. But there's some standard, probably half a dozen to a dozen ones that are commonly used, depending on the degree and severity. And that's what it is. It's medication.
What are they designed to do specifically?
Quiet down the neurosynaptic activity. With a schizophrenic's brain, there's too much. Most of us have we want to do this, and so our brain says, okay, wiggle your fingers, and it triggers the various parts of your body that does that. For schizophrenic, this is all random. And so the neurosynaptic messages are going everywhere. So medication basically quiets that down, puts the insulation back on the wire, if you will. So now we can sort of have an okay process. So without the medication, again, it starts to go sideways. But with the medication, they can be as functional as you.
Yeah. So their brain is a little too active, huh?
Yeah.
That's basically
that's a oversimplification, but yes.
Yeah. All right. Talking with Peter Nazaretian. You're welcome to call in. And do you have any questions about schizo, or do you have any questions about mental illness? Peter is here to answer any and all of your questions. We've got an open phone line at 436-ME-TV option 11. Here to help you on this day. Peter is a national board certified counselor, so he's an expert in the field. He's dealt with this for years and years. And waiting to hear from you. We're back in just a moment.
We need help to find this missing child. Erica Parsons was 13 when she disappeared. She was last seen in Salisbury, North Carolina in November of 2011. This is what we believe she looks like today at age 16. If you have any information, please call the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children at 1-800-THE-LOST. That's 1-800-843-5678.
Back here on the program on Connect with Me, 436-ME-TV, hit option 11, and you can talk to Peter. You can ask a question about schizophrenia, ask a question about mental illness in general. He's been, how many years you've been practicing?
20 plus.
Yeah, a long time, a long time. So you're kind of an expert in the field. So let's put up a couple of more full screens of schizo. We can start with whichever one is up on the screen there. You can kind of read these for yourself. Usually it starts in the late teens to early 20s, men in their late 20s, women in their early 30s. Really? I mean, it shows up that late?
It can. Most of the time it is in the late teens, early 20s, which is particularly disconcerting if you have a young person in your family who's doing very well through childhood, doing very well through adolescence, and then suddenly late in 18, 19, 20, 21 starts to go sideways. Well, the easy thing is, well, they're doing drugs perhaps, because that's the time in life when you would do that sort of thing. So sometimes it can mask itself as that. They're also sort of coming into their own, so they're having their own thoughts and ideas. So, well, maybe they're just having strange ideas. So sometimes it can be hard to figure out what that is, because it may seem like it's sort of typical for the age.
And then symptoms can start suddenly, or they can go in the other directions. They can just happen in a gradual way.
I have found that when kids get into doing drugs, which of course again in that late adolescence is kind of a typical time, especially stimulating drugs like methamphetamines, oftentimes if there is a propensity for schizophrenia, it triggers it. You let the beast out of the cage. It can happen all at once, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
All right, caller, go ahead. You're on the air.
Yes. Is there a very few people are just evil and should be locked up? Or can everybody be helped? Thank you.
Can everybody be helped, or are there some people that are just evil? Is that how I understood that?
I think so, and that's a little bit of a tough question, because are there some people who just seem to be bad people? Yeah, but that doesn't mean they have schizophrenia. Do some people with schizophrenia get paranoid? And that's one of the most common types of paranoid delusional schizophrenia, where they're hearing voices that make them want to hurt people or themselves. Of course, that's extreme. That's not necessarily typical. I think some people are just not such nice people. Doesn't mean they have schizophrenia. I think some people are perfectly nice folks, but they have schizophrenia, and it makes them say and do odd things. So can anybody be helped? If it's schizophrenia, medication can certainly be a help.
Can everyone be helped?
If they seek it. You know, on the other hand, like again, continuum. If somebody is, and in the hospital I was in, of course, we had a special unit for people who are gravely disabled that way. If it's the point where enough you can probably help everybody, but enough medication to make the stop can also make them almost comatose. If it's very extreme, yes, you can calm them down, but you might not get much functionality. But that's rare. That's unusual.
I mean, we all feel paranoid to a certain extent, don't we?
Sometimes, you know.
So,
do I look okay?
No, you look fine. I'm just saying, because I get paranoid about certain things. Does that mean I have schizo?
No.
I mean, it's not every day. It's not all the time. But once in a while, I'll get a little paranoid about certain items.
We all have sensitivities, and you know, paranoia is perfectly normal when it becomes pervasive, when it becomes you can't get out of it, or when it becomes you have to do something about it. You know, that seems like weird or bizarre to the rest of us. Yeah, then it gets a little difficult. But no, everybody has a little paranoia.
As long as it doesn't control you?
Yeah.
If it starts controlling you, then what?
Get some help.
Yeah.
You know, go to a mental health professional, go to the hospital. You know, if it's pervasive, then medication is necessary.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking over your shoulder like every 2 minutes, you got a little problem, don't you?
Well, you have to think where people, you know, are we being watched right now? Are there cameras here? Are everybody watching? You know, if they're starting to really think they're
aliens.
Yeah. I'm getting messages from Venus through the fillings in my teeth. You know, it's probably over the edge.
You got an issue.
Yep.
Schizophrenia for kids. Let's put that one up on the screen, and you can see. You agree with some of this? Because I did a lot of research this week on schizo, and there's some of the things I came up with. Got some of these from a couple of websites, news websites. You know, I guess a change in friends, drop in grades, sleeping problems. I don't know. Are these signs?
Yes, absolutely. Of course, these are also signs, with the exception of the last one, the family history of psychosis, which is a huge trigger. Schizophrenia is a genetic disorder. It comes through the family. If someone is using drugs, you're going to get a lot of those same symptoms. So that's why it gets a little. If you're talking about kids, that's not likely they're going to be using drugs. So yes, this is a valid list. If it's a little bit older, then well, are they using some substance? Because those things could all happen with that too.
Yeah, interesting. So family history plays a major role.
Huge.
Even if it's far back down the line in your gene pool there?
Sure, you can skip generations and degrees. It can veer off to a different form. Schizophrenia will tend to lead to schizophrenia, but does it come out as bipolar or anxiety or some other disorder? ADD perhaps. ADD, mania from bipolar, and a few other situations all have the same thing in common: an excess of neuron activity firing. Too much. It's like all the cars on the LA freeway trying to get off the same exit at the same time.
Yeah.
And it's just too much. It's overloads.
Caller, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Hi. Go ahead. You're on the air. Go ahead.
Yes, I wanted to, I have my older brother. He was born in 1944, and in 1960, when I was 8 years old, he had a problem with. I guess he came home from a party or something, and he came home and he locked himself in the room, and for 2 days he went crazy, so to speak. He banging on the walls. Just my mom had to lock him in the room because he was just up for 2 days. eventually, they took him to Norwalk State Hospital in Norwalk in Los Angeles area, and they gave him shock treatment at those days. And what happened was, it was a long process, but he's still alive today, and my mom took care of him since that time. When he must have been about I was about 8 years old. He must have been about 16 years old. He was normal. He'd come in and out. He'd laugh. He'd look at the mirror, and he just talked to himself. And so over a period of all these years, we got used to that. But my mom took him to the doctor, and they gave him medication, and what happened is she took care of him until she died in 2005 at the age of 85 years old, and he lived with her in the house. Right now, my nephew's taking care of him, and he's still alive, but he's under medication through the state or through the Los Angeles area. I guess he has different psychiatrists that sees him. Now, one of the questions that we were concerned about is how did he get that, and we feel that somebody who wanted to get revenge or get even with him for back in those days, they think that they gave him they spiked his drink with LSD, and we weren't really sure, but all of a sudden that happened. Ever since that happened that day, those 2 nights that he stayed up all night, just literally going crazy. I remember making him yelling and screaming. And so I don't know what they diagnosed him as, because I was a young kid, but I think it's what you're talking about, all these symptoms, and I don't know. It's he'll be normal for a little while. He'll talk to you normal, and then he goes into his little world. Is that the symptoms you're talking about?
Keep the caller there, if you would.
Yeah, thank you for calling in. It's very revealing, and it shows several things you were talking about. The very quick onset. It does sound like he probably had something spiked in his drink. It could have been something as simple as speed. LSD, I don't know. That
can do it.
It's possible, but putting LSD in somebody's drink is a little bit more of a movie thing than legitimate. But that maybe he got super drunk, that maybe they gave him some speed, which would be typical in those days, and that triggered the onset, an immediate onset. Yeah, and then went crazy a couple of days, and after that, as I say, the beast was out of the cage, and so for years after that, he struggled and took medication. So,
does it sound like his brother has schizo?
Based on what we just heard there, yeah, I wouldn't rule that out at all.
Yeah. Caller, are you still there?
Yes, I'm still here.
Yeah. Did you hear the answer, or?
Oh yes, I appreciated your call. I mean your information. But my mom was so confused for a while. She didn't understand what was going on. But at this point, she dealt with it and took care of him with medication and everything. And
yeah.
And he's still okay. I mean, he's still doing well. I mean, considering his age now, he's going to be 71 this year, I believe.
Well, it brings up the idea that when you...
But it's a serious illness that really affects the whole family.
Yes, it does. And you mentioned your mom struggling with that for years and years and living with them. And it's very difficult to have a youngster that's doing fine, 10, 12, 13, 16 years old, and suddenly snaps. What happened to my baby boy?
Yeah.
Where did he go? What is this? Very disconcerting.
Yeah. Peter Nazaretian is here talking about mental health, talking about schizophrenia. We do have an open line. You can call in at 436-MeTV option 11. Just so you know, Peter is an expert. He's a national board certified counselor, family therapist, been working in this field for more than 20 years. So call in and ask a question. Don't be bashful. Back in a moment.
It's almost time.
Now we'll find out once and for all about Clark Kent and Superman.
Look up in the sky. It's a bird. It's a plane. It's a TV show.
Yes, but who is he? What's his name?
He's Superman.
Golly, Clark, won't that be wonderful seeing Superman?
Fighting a never-ending battle for truth, justice, and television the MeTV way.
No one can do the things that Superman does.
The adventures of Superman.
Now on MeTV Fresno, Xfinity 187.
Ventura TV Appliance Center. We're the save energy, save time, save money place. The Energy Star qualified #1 rated high-efficiency Cabrio from Whirlpool Place. You heard right. Right now, save big on select Whirlpool Cabrio laundry pairs and pay no interest when paid in full within 6 months. At the hometown low price, think outside the big box place. Since 1951, Ventura TV Appliance Center. We're working hard to be your place.
Back here on the program talking with an expert, Peter Nazaretian, talking about mental health. He's a family therapist. He's a national board certified counselor. And I just want to ask you, caller, I know you're there. Hang on one moment because I got to ask you a question. We talked about family history and having perhaps psychosis, maybe members of your distant past, you know, members of your family. If you had a grandmother or a great-grandfather, let's say, or a great-uncle down the road who committed suicide, does that play a factor?
In terms of whether is that schizophrenia or would that lead to schizophrenia?
Could that lead to something like that happening to a family member of yours, like a grandchild or a child?
Well, you know, you bring
is that mental illness, by the way? If you commit suicide, is that
probably? But you know, people in 1929 when the stock market crashed, people jumped out of windows. So were they all mentally ill? No, they were just losing.
They were depressed.
So their life just changed. So no, it doesn't have to be that. There are many factors for that. However, it does lead to an interesting situation back in the, let's say, 20s, 30s, and 40s before medication came in at all. Your typical thing with the family, if you had someone like this, you locked them in the closet when, people came over, kind of thing.
Threw the key away.
You put on Clara in the basement, we have company tonight. And, it wasn't funny in those days at all, but you just kept him home. Like the caller earlier said, Mom basically kept him at home for years and years and years. And that's what you do. So we're fortunate now to have medication and facilities that can treat these kinds of things. But to answer your question about suicide, schizophrenia doesn't necessarily lead to suicide at all. However, if there's a history of suicide in the family, future generations are 5 times more likely to go in that direction.
Wow. Caller, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Hi. I'm calling to find out, are panic attacks a source or form of schizo?
Good question. Easy answer, no. Panic attacks are more about anxiety. Uncontrolled anxiety to the point where it freaks them out, and so they're not able to soothe themselves or calm down or have some kind of coping mechanism. Maybe a kissing cousin to schizophrenia in the terms of the overexcitement of neurosynaptic activity, but no, that wouldn't typically be indicating that at all. You'd want to calm down. You want to learn some breathing techniques. Again, there's medication for that. But the medication for this oftentimes is very addictive. And I'm a little uncomfortable with patients who are taking benzodiazepines or opiates to try to calm down. The good news is...
Can that send you over the edge, those medications?
Those are medications that calm you down, so probably not in themselves. Stimulants would, much more likely. So it's okay to calm down, but I don't know if you're saying, well, I'm anxious, so I'll take some anxiety medication. You're kind of trading a headache for an upset stomach. I'm not anxious anymore, but now I've got an addiction problem. Is that better? But when people are incredibly anxious, boy, 2 in the mouth sure sounds like a good idea.
Wow. Hey, how about an email question?
Sure.
Would schizo tendencies show up in DNA screening?
It's a great question. We being the community of mental health, is always trying to find ways to nail these kind of things down. It is very difficult to look at DNA and say this is a component like depression or anxiety. So the tests are being developed all the time. It wouldn't surprise me if that would be available at some point. But right now, as far as I know, there's no definitive test to tell.
Okay, and what about if someone is diagnosed with schizo, would they qualify for, say, disability compensation? Does mental health fall into that category?
Not my area of expertise. However, if you're debilitated and cannot function, then I think disability becomes an option. So, at some level, I'm probably yes.
Yeah. I want to put some more full screens up on the television screen here, and or we got to go to break? Oh, okay. We're going to go to break. Talking with Peter Nazaretian. He's a family therapist, national board certified counselor. We're talking about schizo. We'll move into a different area of mental illness as we come back here and continue on the program. 436-MeTV option 11. Hey, we got an open phone line here on a Friday morning. Back in a moment.
Retro TV, your home for classic television. The greatest shows in history are here for you to enjoy. Join Cosby and Colt as secret agent men in I Spy. Ride along the Ponderosa with the Cartwrights in Bonanza. Hit the beat with Joe Friday in Dragnet. And that's not all. Retro TV offers endless fun and excitement for the whole family to enjoy. Retro TV, the best in classic television.
You can find Retro TV on over-the-air channel 13.4.
A family member who has mental illness? Do you know a friend? Maybe you've had some problems yourself. Are you on medication? Call in, ask a question to our expert here today, Peter Nazaretian. Glad you're along with us on a Friday morning here on Connect with Me on MeTV Fresno. So Peter, want to get into some other areas of mental illness and issues and topics that we want to talk about today and how we get to be the way that we are. Let's put that up on the screen. We'll put these up individually and you can talk about each individual topic right there. What emotional dynamics shape us and when does it happen?
That's a great question. I kind of like this area. I'm going to make a bold statement for our viewers out there. We are the way we are for things that happen to us between the ages of 5 and 10. Now that's a bold statement. After spending many, many years in the psych hospital and seeing literally thousands and thousands of people and talking to each one of them individually at length, I'm convinced that's really what it is. Now, that doesn't mean what happens before 5 is not important, or certainly what happens after 10. Certainly the teenage years are incredibly tumultuous. But that determines who we are for a very simple reason. We don't get cognitive processing until about 5 years old. If you think what is your earliest memory, not snippets and bits, but actual clear memory, it's about 5 years old, about kindergarten. And we get complex concepts around 12. The ability to understand that you can say this and this but mean that, now we can do that around 12 years old. Before that, it's concrete. So the point is, you're old enough to know something's going on and young enough to have no idea what it is. But basically, everything gets in under the radar between 5 and 10, basically kindergarten to 6th grade. So whatever's going on in the family, whatever's going on around you, that's just normal. No matter how bizarre it might be, that's just the way it is. So we take that as a basis, and that determines who we are 20 years later, because that's our normal, whatever it is. It isn't until we start staying over at our friend's house for a sleepover or something, 10, 12 years old, wow, is your mom always like that? Is your dad always like that? Because it's not like mine. And we start to realize, wait, the world is a little different than my house. Take it one more step. When you go to aunt's house or uncle's house, if they're raised by the same family, chances are their house is about the same. The same dynamics occur for them too. So even the extended family isn't going to give you a different viewpoint necessarily until you start hanging out with other people. So that 12 years old, 5 to 10 years old determines who we are.
Wow. For everyone, for the most part.
Yep.
Yep. What about kids that are raised in a drug-ridden family? Parents that are in jail, say a drug-ridden neighborhood. What about those kids?
Absolutely.
There are kids that get out of that situation and they're not living in that environment any longer because they become successful. So how do you explain that?
Well, first of all, there's exceptions to every rule. A young person raised in that environment is going to, break out and say this isn't for me and do something else. How common is that? Much more common to try to basketball your way out of it. But yes, of course, some people break out of that. For the most part, however, that's why you have inner cities where it just goes on and on and on, because you're raised in that environment. That becomes normal. Drugs, violence, lack of family structure, it's a way of life. So, which is one of the reasons gangs proliferate, because they become a family. I mean, dysfunctional perhaps, but we can all go here and do this,
Right.
So that becomes, and if you're, of course, gang mentality, or even in an area where people are struggling a lot, it colors the way you see the world.
Yeah, amazing. Let's put the next one up there, Lauren, and we've got this. Do things affect us forever? That is a great question.
Well, again, not everybody, not all the time, but largely, if you're having an incredibly dysfunctional childhood, is it going to lead to a dysfunctional adulthood? Unless you change, unless you recognize what the problem is and seek help for it.
Well, let me ask you an example. I didn't mean to cut you off. I apologize. Well, we got a call, so I got to hold that thought.
Okay.
So, sorry.
Sure.
Caller, go ahead.
Good morning, John. Peter, several questions, of course. Are you, I came a little late on the program, but are you born, can this possibility that you're born with schizophrenia, I can't pronounce it, but
schizophrenia.
Are you born with that, or is that something that kicks it off? Okay, that's my first question.
Okay.
Second question, have you ever seen a healing through medicine that they took for a while and they didn't need the medicine anymore? some miraculous miracle that it was healed? They didn't have it anymore. Third question, if you can remember, counseling. Does that help with being, if you have schizo, counseling, does that improve it to resolve their problem that they're having through counseling? Okay, and thank you, Peter, for being on your program, and thank you, John.
Thank
you. Okay, talk to you later.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Great questions, and thank you very much.
Schizo.
Yes. It is a genetic disorder. You can't catch it. You can't develop it. It's there. So, unfortunately, it's genetic. And the second question was about medication?
Healing through medicine. Can you get off the medicine?
Yeah. Depending on the degree and severity, if it's fairly mild, you may be able to learn to cope with it. But if it's schizophrenia the way we know it, unfortunately, medication may be necessary for a lifetime to control it. And counseling, the statistics will tell us that counseling and medication together is the best combination. Neither one works as well individually. So just be aware. So it can work, especially if on medication. Yes, the combination would be terrific.
Counseling, can it help improve it?
Yeah. Well, if they're taking medication, then yes. Counseling and medication together is the best combination. So yes.
Let's go back to that full screen. It says, do things affect us forever? And I was going to ask you a kind of a humorous question. You're going to laugh at this, but when I was a small child, maybe about 5 years old, I wouldn't eat my food. And this was a long time ago, okay? So the rules were different. So my mom took a metal tray and she bonked me over the head with it. And boy, that food was gone in like 30 seconds. I never forgot that. So can things like that stick with you forever?
Well, apparently it can. and your mom hitting you with a metal tray probably explains a lot, John.
Imagine doing that today. You'd be in jail.
No, you couldn't do it today.
God.
But those are the days when you whacked them in the back of the head and they did it. Yeah, if you're going to bop me on the head, I'll eat. It's just a matter of who's in control here. Oh, I guess you are.
So I guess the broader question is, do tragic things that happen, do they trigger something, and then do they stick with you for life until you go into the grave?
If you're asking me, when I deal with people, that's one of the most common things we see is those issues, especially between 5 and 10, that are traumatic, and 20 and 30 years later, they're still biting us on the butt. And sometimes people will think, well, isn't there a statute of limitations on this? I mean, isn't there some point where this stuff just fades away? I mean, that was like 30 years ago. No, no, it doesn't. It will stay with you forever. People who are triggered by memories of some kind and they bring it back and they go, oh, I remember when I was a kid, somebody bopped me on the head with a tray. Yeah, you remember that stuff. It sticks with you, whatever. I mean, that's fairly humorous, but sometimes it's not so. It's a little more serious. But yes, it does.
Right. But a serious thing that happens to you, that can happen to you, like seeing, let's say, a family member murdered. I mean, that obviously, or someone dying that's close to you.
Absolutely.
Whatever.
Let me give you a common one. A young kid is in the house. Dad goes away. Mom marries 2 or 3 times. Or has 2 or 3, stepdads. But each one of them eventually gets disgusted with the situation and leaves. Does that person develop abandonment issues? A man in my life, let's say it's a young girl, a man is never going to stay because all the men that I saw Mom with, they just kept leaving. So later in life, is she always testing the men to see if they're going to leave? I see that constantly.
Yeah.
So those things will absolutely color our lives. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, certain things will stick with us forever, my friends. 436-MeTV, option 11. Got a phone line open. You can call Peter Nazaretian, National Board Certified Counselor, Family Therapist, is here today to answer any and all of your questions. Back in a moment.
Frigidaire. We introduced the first home freezer, the first pulsator agitator washer, and now we introduce the Frigidaire Orbit Clean dishwasher, designed with a unique wash arm that gives you 4 times more water coverage for a consistently better clean. Frigidaire, over 90 years of legendary innovation.
See the full line of Frigidaire appliances at Ventura TV Electronics and Appliances.
Back here on the program with Peter Nazaretian. Glad you're here. 436-MeTV, option 11. A call is coming in. Good morning. You're on the air, caller.
I'm sorry you got hit on the head, John.
That's okay.
That is so funny.
I survived.
That you still remember all this many years.
Yeah.
My question to Peter is, I was given to my grandmother when I was 6 months old, and that was several years ago. But I, for some reason, have never, I don't know, been able to get over it. I've often thought, why me? Why only me, not my sister or my brother? Not that I didn't have a good, grandmother. I mean, my grandmother was the best. I never got hit. I never got punished for anything. So I guess I never gave her a reason. But still, it's always bothered me. Why was I given to my grandmother? And you are right. The things that happen to you, they stay with you, and it's hard to forget. Would I need some kind of counseling?
Well, it sounds like you're doing pretty well. I mean, but this is a question you have. You're talking about those things. Stay with us. Here's a caller. Thank you very much, by the way, where it obviously has. But let's take a look at the possibilities. Mom was incapable of taking care of her for whatever reason at that time.
Wow.
Wasn't the case with the brother or sister a year later or earlier sooner. But for her at that moment, Grandma needed to step in. Of course, the caller is struggling with abandonment issues. Why didn't my mom want me? What's wrong with me? Why am I not okay? And the reality is, you take the pressure off yourself. You may be fine. Mom had the issue, not you. You were fine. Mom just couldn't handle it. So Grandma took over. Luckily, you had a good grandma. But does it lead you to think, I wasn't good enough? What must have been wrong with me? Nothing wrong with you. You were delightful. But Mom just couldn't handle it for whatever reason. So luckily, it seems like you've done okay. Would it be a good idea to talk to a counselor a little bit and just kind of sort that out and realize it was Mom's issue and not yours? Yeah, probably. Not long term, but a session or a few sessions might not be a bad idea. So something to consider.
Yeah. All right, talking about mental illness today here on the program, and it is a serious topic. In fact, it's probably, I would say, top of mind for most people these days, right? Mental illness. I mean, it affects a lot of people.
It does, and of course with the internet and television, it's now we're just much more aware of it. As we're talking earlier, if you had a problem before, you lock them in the closet. Well, now everybody knows everything. So heightened awareness all over the place.
But are we too dependent on pills?
Well, I think in some ways that's a good point. If you're taking a pill for everything, 2 in the mouth will fix it, and that's not always a good thing. But if it's truly mental illness, yeah, because that's the only way. There's no, you're not going to therapize somebody out of schizophrenia.
All right. Can we change? That's the other graphic I want to put up. If so, how can I change?
You can only change if you want to. And that sounds silly, but that's the way it is. You need 3 key pieces. This is interesting. You need 3 key pieces. Someone going into therapy needs 3 key elements in order to make that work. Number 1, insight. What's the real problem? And oftentimes people don't realize what the real problem is. A little bit like when we were in high school, we learned that 1/5 of the iceberg sits above the water and 4/5 sits under the water. Well, oftentimes that 1/5 is presenting. That's the anxiety, the substance abuse, the anger, whatever it might be. And so we therapize that. In reality, what's the 4/5 under it? Where's that coming from? That never gets touched. So that's a tough thing. So you got to understand what the real problem is, number 1. Number 2, motivation. Got to want to change it. In the hospital, when I ask people, you're having a difficult life, do you want to change it? Everybody says yes. Of course, I don't want to be like this. I want to change it. Oh, yeah, I want to have a better life. But people want to talk about it because talking about losing weight is not the same as losing weight. Talking about being angry is not the same as being angry. So do you really want to change this, or you want to talk about it? And third is flexibility. Once we come up with ideas, tools, ways to make it change, can you follow through and do it? So basically, do you see it? Do you want it? Will you do it?
Yeah, but don't most people need help in all 3 of those areas?
Well, number 1 especially. I call that the 3-legged stool of therapy, and if you don't have all 3, the stool falls over. So you got to understand what the real problem is, just for starters. It's not somebody else, it's you.
But when you say, you got to do it yourself, you got to want to do it yourself, but you need, do some people or all people or most people need assistance? Do they need a push?
It's a good idea. That's what coming to counseling is all about. Something's not right, I'm not getting along, I got to learn to communicate. But you have to recognize what the problem is. Oftentimes, you're the problem. I'm not having a good life because you don't treat me right. You're not this, you're not that, you're not something. Well, that may be an issue, but if it's always somebody else, it makes you wonder, really? Everybody else? I got a client who moved.
Everybody else but you.
Well, I had a client that moved like 12 times in a year because every landlord was not a good person. And, really? Everyone? I'm thinking after about the 4th move, it wasn't them. It might have been you. So what is the real issue? Sometimes if we think everybody else is against us or everybody else isn't treating us right or not meeting our needs, really, is it everybody else? Or maybe do we look at ourselves? And that's hard to turn that lens around on ourselves. It's not easy sometimes.
Wow. And patients that you see and have seen over the last 20 years, do most of them get it that they got to turn that lens around, or do they? Is it just almost like moving Mount Rushmore?
Yeah, not necessarily. Oftentimes when we have issues, it's easy to blame somebody else for it. And again, this goes back those years between 5 and 10. What was the dynamic? Did Dad always deny he had the problem? It wasn't his drinking. Mom was just a nag. And so we start to learn that's the way it is. Well, as we get older, we realize, no, actually it was probably your drinking, and Mom was just trying to get you out of it. So,
how do I find out what that problem is that I have?
Come to a counselor, somebody who you trust and knows what they're talking about. Tell them what's going on. They'll probably give you some good feedback.
Okay, caller, are you there? Caller, go.
Yes?
Yeah, you're there. Go ahead.
Okay. What I was calling is I overheard the man, I can't remember his name now.
Peter.
That he was about bipolar, and my husband, before he died, he had bipolar, and the man also mentioned, the counselor mentioned that things happen to you when you're younger, at between 5 and 10 or something like that. Well, my husband told me a story about his father. He wanted to be around his father, and he was a menopause baby anyway, and his father was really, he was 50 when he was born, when my husband was born, and so he said, told my husband one time, he said, and my husband always remembered this, go and sleep with your puppies, and that just really hurt him. I know it did. And he had bipolar later in life, and I was wondering if something that could have caused, I know he wanted to be with his dad so much, and if it could have caused that.
Okay, I didn't get it. What is it that the dad said?
Go sleep with the puppies or something. And bipolar we haven't talked about today, but
no. Bipolar, schizophrenia and bipolar in the manic. Bipolar, by the way, for those who don't know, is that it's what they call bipolar. There's two poles, high and low. Oftentimes there's a depressive component. Oftentimes there's what we call a manic component. It used to be called manic depression years ago. Now it's we call it bipolar. In a manic phase, again, the synapses are firing too much. So in that sense, it's a little bit like schizophrenia, where there's too much neurosynaptic activity. Sometimes people in bipolar can seem bizarre and odd. It doesn't usually have the paranoid piece that schizophrenia might.
What do you mean bizarre and odd?
They can
super highs.
Yeah. They want to spend a lot of money. They're grandiose. I'm the king of the world. It's a little irrational in that sense. It seems a little bit schizophrenic in the terms of everybody's watching me. So. Similar part of the forest, but bipolar is a little bit different. It's hard to tell what that brief snippet from the caller, and thank you for calling in, by the way. It's hard to tell from that brief snippet if that was a bipolar moment for Dad, who really thought it was a good idea to go sleep with the dogs because it seemed, that seemed somehow credible, or whether he was thinking that'll keep you warm, or they'll entertain you, or what was really going on there. It's a little hard to tell from that. But obviously later on he developed bipolar. And that can develop later in life too. That's again, that doesn't necessarily have to come on till late adolescence or early 20s.
Or later in life, even?
It can. And
depending on what happens during the course of your life?
Stress, anxiety, drugs, an operation of some kind, things can trigger. If the chemistry is fragile, it can trigger it.
Yeah. Talking with Peter Nazaretian, a family therapist, well-renowned National Board Certified Counselor, my friends. He's helping us all out here today on the program. 436-MeTV option 11 if you want to call in and ask your questions. We're also going to talk a little bit more about mental health, and then we'll get into the Bruce Jenner situation and see if maybe, is that mental health, or is that kind of fall into the same category or not? 436-MeTV option 11, back in a moment.
Hello, I'm John Walsh. We need your help to capture this fugitive. Julio Cesar Guevara Mejia is wanted by the FBI in Sacramento for the attempted murder of a 19-year-old female in November of 2007. Police say he lured the young woman to a hotel room where he shot her 3 times in the chest. He could be in Palm Springs, California or Houston, Texas. Contact the FBI at 1-800-CALL-FBI if you have any information.
Remaining moments here with Peter Nazaretian, a family therapist, national board certified counselor, and I want to put up another full screen. I want to talk about how come most people don't change? Well, we kind of got into that a little bit on the last one, Can We Change? So why is it that most people don't change? Because they don't turn that lens around?
That's right. It's all everybody else's fault, so why do I have to change? You're the problem.
That's why they don't. That's as simple as that.
They don't see it, yeah.
Wow. So, caller, go ahead. You're on the air. Caller?
Yes?
Yeah, turn down your TV set, and if you're on speaker, don't be on speakerphone either. Thank you.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Turn it down now. Yeah.
Go ahead. Quickly, go ahead.
Hello?
You're on the air. Go ahead.
Okay. I can't hear him talking to anybody else. Anyway, I wanted to ask a question about my daughter who has paranoid schizophrenia. She's close quarters where she hears other people around, and she says they've been trying to have her evicted and other things of that sort. And some of the things I think I believe are true. But I'm trying to see if there's some way that I can figure out what is true and what isn't. Is there any way I can figure that out?
Okay. Thank you very much for the call. Thank you.
Great question, and it cuts to when people are struggling with a mental illness like schizophrenia. The landlord wants to evict me. There may be some truth to that, because they may be acting bizarre, doing strange things in the middle of the night, and the landlord may, this person is wacky, we want to get him out. So it's not necessarily a delusion. On the other hand, they may be imagining that's happening because of the paranoid schizophrenia. Everybody's against me. The landlord might not even be aware that she's doing anything at all, but she feels that they are because she's hearing it. So, and the question is, how can I tell? In that case, probably in a specific case, talk to the landlord.
Yeah.
My daughter says that you want to evict me. Is that true? Yeah, she's being weird. Okay, then it's true. Or really, your daughter? Which one is she? Then obviously she's not.
Another call. I will take the call, but I want to put the full screen up, and you can answer this before I take the call here. Hang on, caller. Would medication help? How does it work? We kind of got into that before. Go ahead.
If it's a serious mental illness like schizophrenia, especially, medication is going to be very critical, depending on the degree. It also helps bipolar. It also helps depression, but of course it's the degree and how much medication. So can it help? Yes.
Not much time, but go ahead, caller. You're on the air.
I'm just calling the first question that I saw, and I jumped in. First question I saw was that individuals, why don't they change? I mean, personality, if I'm correct, is formed by the age of 5, and at that time, personality, the axis 2 really doesn't change at all. Second question, medication. What I'm wondering is with schizophrenia, they use sedatives to actually slow down that electrical process that's triggering hallucinations, that's triggering, the paranoia.
Yeah.
With bipolar, they're sort of trying to balance out everything. But, when you get into the Axis 1 major depression, the SSRIs, I know that a lot of people are timid about taking this medication. How do we get mental health out there so it doesn't, the stigma is gone, the stigma of mental health conditions and what, improvements have come so far in this, day and age.
Okay. Thank you for the call. The stigma.
Good question. By the way, this caller obviously knows a little bit about mental health. They're talking about Axis 1 and Axis 2, the way we delineate mental illnesses, and also SSRIs. This person knows a little bit what's going on. So thank you for your call. There is a stigma. It seems to be going away. More information helps that. It also, on the other hand, brings up more and more issues like the Bruce Jenner thing. It pops up. So yes, medication can help. Getting to a good psychiatrist who can prescribe, getting to a good counselor who can talk about it, the best combination.
Quickly, we want to get to the Bruce Jenner stuff, but last full screen, what are the 3 issues that are common to virtually all of us? Put that full screen up if we can here. Nope, wrong one. What are the 3 issues that are common to virtually all of us right there?
That's a great question I put up there because in the hospital, no matter what people presented for in terms of their pathology, I found there were 3 key elements that underscored virtually every bit of pathology I saw.
Okay.
Boundaries, communication skills, and self-esteem.
Boundaries, communication skills, and self-esteem.
Those things are common to virtually everybody, especially people who struggle with mental illness.
All right, talking about self-esteem, boundaries, how about Bruce Jenner? Let's put up some photos before and after. You know what he looked like before. Here's what he looks like now. I remember him as that star, world-class Olympic athlete that won the gold medal back in '76, and now, of course, the famous interview on ABC. What's going on here, Peter?
Well, this is not a mental illness. This is specifically, it's called a gender identity disorder. Someone who is born with a male body but has felt female, and of course it goes the other way too. Sometimes that combination just doesn't quite match. You know, we're male physically and male mentally. Of course, that's typical.
You mean the brain doesn't match up with the body?
That's right. I think I'm a woman inside, but I was born with a male body. There's a hormonal wash at the end of the first trimester in pregnancy that basically determines our degree of masculinity or femininity, and that's not a precise thing at all, which is why 10% of the population is gay, because in fact it's not a precise thing. And in Bruce Jenner's case, he had a male body, but he always felt identified with the female sensibilities. I remember him too, you know, and that young man waving the flag, carrying his kid around after he had won, and you know, the
gold medal.
Hair was a little longer, but that was the style at the time, and we thought, you know, this is an all-American boy next door. He looked terrific. We find out that all these years later, he's always identified as a female and tried to cover it up. And you know, I'm a male. I got to act one. I got to get married. I got to have children. Maybe it'll help. And in realizing I'm not being true to myself. I'm really have a female sensibility. But of course, the world doesn't understand that. If you look like a male and have male genitalia, you're a male. There can't be anything else. Well, there is.
Why did it take him so long then to figure this thing out? I mean, it's been almost a lifetime.
I would expect societal pressure had a lot to do with it, especially as an Olympic athlete. Nobody wants to see that. You know, that's the image you have, and everybody knows about it. For those of us who just wander through the world, nobody knows this, well, who cares? But when you're in a high profile like that, suddenly saying, I think I'm a girl, wow, especially in those days, that would have been...
So maybe Bruce Jenner, from what you're saying, was afraid to ruin that image that was etched in our brain from 1976?
You know, I can't speak for him, but that's entirely possible, yeah.
Yeah. Hey, I want to get back to the 3 commonalities that we have. They are, again...
boundaries, communication skills, and self-esteem.
Okay. If you have maybe just one of those, like you have great communication skills, but you're lacking in the other 2 areas, then what?
Well, these are the 3 issues that I see in everybody. That doesn't mean that each one of them is a problem. It's just these are the issues. Most people don't feel that good about themselves. Most people don't feel they're enough. I'm just not enough. I'm not tall enough.
They don't measure up?
I'm not tall enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not pretty enough. I'm not rich enough. Whatever. I'm just not enough. And if I'm not enough, the other basic fear is I won't be loved. So if I'm not good enough, I won't be loved. Well, everybody has a degree of this. Even if you're particularly good at something, usually you're not so good at something else. And gee, I'm not good in math. I'm really good in communicating, but I'm not good in math. I'm deficient. There was that self-esteem piece.
Do you think even the Pope would have self-esteem issues?
Well, I can't speak for self-esteem issues, but it wouldn't surprise me if there was, you know, everybody isn't good at everything. So that deficiency leads to a certain amount of issues. And some people can't say no, which is boundaries, and some people can't communicate their needs very well. So that becomes difficult too. So some combination of those 3.
I sure appreciate your time. You're always a good guest.
I appreciate being
here. And you know
here.
I want you to come back.
Thanks, man. Anytime. If this is helpful to anybody out there, please feel free to invite me back. I'll answer any questions you have.
Absolutely. Got 10 seconds. What's your phone number?
At the office at 221-8874.
Great. Okay, Peter Nazaretian, a family therapist, national board certified counselor. Going to do it for us today. Have a great weekend. Happy Mother's Day, everybody. We'll see you back here Monday with Monty Torres.